Night settled over the small American town like a curtain of quiet judgment. Streetlights flickered over rain-soaked sidewalks, and the sound of distant thunder echoed through the narrow streets. In the middle of that storm, a man driven by pride was about to make the worst decision of his life, one that heaven was already preparing to overturn. Caleb Whitmore walked out of his black SUV with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. Money had opened every door. Power had protected every flaw. Pride had blinded every warning. And tonight he was determined to prove a point, that no one could reject him, underestimate him, or make him feel small. Not even a simple girl like Ella Turner. Inside the warm, crowded diner, the kind where everyone knew everyone's story, Ella moved between tables with gentle courtesy. She carried the quiet strength of someone who had survived more than she ever shared. Her smile was small but sincere, her eyes soft but honest. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and maybe that was why she caught Caleb's attention in the first place. He didn't want her heart. He didn't want her story. He wanted a reaction, a victory, proof that he could take interest in anyone, and they'd fall at his feet. But heaven had heard that thought. When Caleb walked into the diner, thunder cracked as if warning him. A gust of wind pushed the door wide open, and for a split second their eyes met. Ella felt something shift. She didn't know his name, but there was something in his gaze. Something unsettled, something searching, something hiding behind all that confidence. She didn't know he was about to use her. He didn't know God was about to break him. And neither of them knew that this moment, this single, unexpected moment, would change their lives forever. Because God has a way of turning pride into purpose. He has a way of revealing hearts before words. He has a way of showing that no game played with someone innocent ever ends the way pride imagines. Tonight, it wouldn't be Ella who learned a lesson. It would be Caleb, the man who came to prove a point but would end up on his knees, discovering that the only love worth having is the one heaven writes with truth, humility, and grace. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe for more redeemed heart stories of faith, love, and second chances. Now, let the story begin. Caleb Whitmore stepped into the diner like a man entering familiar territory, even though he had never set foot there before. The scent of fresh coffee and warm pie clung to the air, mixing with the quiet chatter of locals who gathered every Friday night. Everyone looked up. New faces were rare in such a close-knit town. Caleb felt their eyes on him, but to him, attention was nothing new. It fed his pride, almost like fuel. He scanned the room, already calculating his next move. This wasn't about hunger or curiosity. It was about control. It was about proving to himself that power still worked everywhere, even in a place untouched by corporate towers and luxury boardrooms. His gaze stopped the moment he saw her. Ella Turner, the girl who smiled without effort and without trying to impress anyone. Caleb didn't like that. People always tried to impress him. Some for business, some for attention, some for validation. But Ella simply existed with a quiet dignity that felt foreign to him. She didn't rush. She didn't pretend. She didn't even notice him at first. And that, to a man driven by ego, felt like a challenge. He straightened his coat and adjusted his expression, ready to begin what he internally called a demonstration. He wasn't here to flirt. He wasn't here to feel anything real. He wanted to test something. Prove something to himself, to the world, maybe even to the shadow of insecurity he pretended didn't exist. Power only feels real when you see its effect on someone else. Ella finally approached his table, her voice soft, calm, and warm, like someone who cared about people even without knowing them. "Good evening. Coffee to start?" she asked. Caleb's pride immediately reacted. She didn't know who he was. She didn't flinch. She didn't gush. She didn't treat him any differently from the older couple at the table beside him. It irritated him more than he expected. "Yes, and whatever your best dish is," he replied, a tone calculated to sound gentle yet superior. Ella simply nodded, unfazed. No spark of admiration. No attempt to impress. For the first time in years, Caleb felt an unexpected sensation. Something uncomfortable. Something he mistook for annoyance, but was closer to conviction. Ella's honesty disarmed him without trying. As she walked away, he watched every detail. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how she balanced plates with practiced grace, how she thanked an elderly man for a compliment with sincerity, not performance. He hated how grounded she was, how real, how untouched by the kind of games he played in the corporate world. Caleb leaned back in his seat, fingers tapping lightly on the table. "Let's see how long it takes," he muttered under his breath. In his world, influence always won, charm always succeeded, pride always triumphed. It never occurred to him that heaven was listening, that pride spoken aloud becomes a battleground God doesn't ignore. Meanwhile, Ella returned with the coffee, the steam rising in gentle spirals between them. "Here you go," she said, placing the cup in front of him. Their eyes met briefly, and something shifted, not for her, but for him. A flicker, a crack in the armor he didn't even know he still wore. He cleared his throat, looking away, pretending it didn't happen. "You're new here," Ella said kindly, not probing, just acknowledging him. Caleb almost smirked. People usually whispered about him, researched him, feared him, or tried to charm him. But she treated him like a person, not a Whitmore, not a millionaire. Just a man sitting at a table. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. "I'm visiting," he replied, purposely vague. He didn't want her to know who he was. Not yet. The game wouldn't work the same if she knew. He wanted to see her reaction to him, not his reputation. He needed to prove that even someone pure-hearted could be swayed by his presence. Pride whispered, "She'll fall for you like everyone does." But Ella didn't lean in. She didn't blush. She didn't linger. She simply said, "Well, welcome. If you need anything, let me know," and walked away. That simplicity felt like an insult to Caleb's ego. He wasn't used to being treated like anyone else. It poked at a wound he thought money had buried long ago. He watched her interact with others. The way she laughed lightly at a child's joke, how she poured coffee for an elderly woman with genuine kindness, how she checked on customers before they even lifted their hands to call her. She lived with purpose in every small detail. It confused him. Why did someone like her stay in a place like this? Caleb's pride whispered explanations. She doesn't know she deserves more. She's never met a real man. She's waiting for someone like you. He didn't see that these thoughts were chains, links forged from insecurity, disguised as confidence. God saw it though, and tonight was only the beginning of the unraveling. Ella returned with his dinner, placing the plate gently before him. "Careful, it's hot," she said with a soft smile. Not flirtatious, not charmed, just kind. And that simplicity pierced him deeper than any seductive gaze ever had. He almost felt small, and Caleb Whitmore didn't like feeling small. "So, you've lived here long?" he asked, initiating conversation to test her. She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "My whole life. I love this town. People here look out for each other." Caleb raised a brow. "Doesn't that ever get boring?" Ella laughed lightly. "Never. When you love people, nothing feels boring." That answer struck him oddly. Love? People? Words that didn't fit his world of mergers, deals, and calculated relationships. But Ella believed them. Genuinely. And for the first time, Caleb felt something tugging at him. Something that felt like curiosity, discomfort, and a strange, quiet longing all at once. As she walked away again, Caleb exhaled deeply, almost frustrated. His plan had barely begun, yet something was already shifting. He came to prove he could win her attention easily. But instead, he felt the unsettling truth rising in his chest. This girl, this simple, humble girl, might be the very one God would use to break him. And pride had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Caleb found himself driving back toward the diner without understanding why. He had meetings scheduled, emails to send, and a reputation to maintain. Yet none of that felt urgent. Something about Ella's quiet strength lingered in his thoughts like a light he didn't want to admit he noticed. He told himself it was all part of the plan. Pride needed a reason. Inside the diner, Ella was arranging fresh flowers on the counter, a small ritual she did every day before the rush. She hummed softly, a tune that matched the morning sun warming the windows. Caleb watched from outside for a moment, wondering why something so ordinary felt so disarming. Ella didn't know she was being observed. That purity made him uneasy. When he finally walked in, the bell above the door chimed. Ella glanced up, surprised but welcoming. "Good morning," she said with a sincerity he wasn't accustomed to. No judgment, no curiosity about why he returned, no assumptions, just kindness. Caleb didn't know how to respond without sounding rehearsed. "I thought I'd try the breakfast here," he said, hoping his calm voice hid the internal conflict. Ella nodded with a light laugh. "Well, you came to the right place. Mrs. Collins makes the best pancakes in town." Caleb smirked. "In town?" She crossed her arms playfully. "You'd be surprised. Small towns compete fiercely." Something in her playful confidence shifted Caleb's expression. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't overly impressed. She wasn't performing for him the way people usually did. It bothered him and intrigued him in equal measure. Pride whispered that she was simply naive. But his heart felt something different, something he wasn't ready to name. As Ella took his order, she noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. Caleb hesitated. No one asked him things like that, not sincerely. People asked about his schedule, not his feelings. "Just busy," he said. Ella nodded as if she understood more than he said. "Busy can be heavy too." Those 5 words slid under his defenses like water finding cracks. Busy can be heavy too. He didn't know how to respond, so he looked away, pretending to check his phone. Ella didn't push him. She simply returned to the counter, continuing her work with a peace that felt almost foreign to him. He resented how affected he felt. While waiting for his food, Caleb watched her move effortlessly through her tasks. She helped an elderly couple find a different table because of the sunlight. She brought extra napkins without being asked. She refilled coffee cups with intuition rather than obligation. She lived in service, not out of weakness, but out of genuine care. Caleb felt something shift inside him. In the corporate world, kindness was currency. Here it was character. Ella wasn't trying to gain anything. She wasn't angling for advantage. That authenticity made him uncomfortable. Pride only thrives where people play the same game. But Ella wasn't playing. When she brought his breakfast, Ella placed the plate carefully, noticing his distant stare. "You're thinking a lot for someone who just wants pancakes," she said with a gentle smile. Caleb almost laughed, caught off guard. "Maybe I am." Ella tilted her head. "Sometimes God slows us down just to make us notice something." Her words hit harder than she intended. Caleb stiffened, masking his reaction. God wasn't a topic in his world, not for years. The mention stirred memories he had long buried, prayers unanswered, disappointments, regrets. He forced a smirk. "Not sure God cares about my breakfast." Ella didn't argue. "God cares about people, and you're one." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, revealing. Caleb felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. He quickly picked up his fork, breaking the moment. Ella excused herself politely, sensing the shift. She never forced conversations. She simply left space for truth, and that made Caleb more uneasy than confrontation ever could. As he ate, Caleb overheard 2 locals whispering about Ella's past, her father leaving, her mother's illness, how she took extra shifts to cover the medical bills. She had carried burdens, yet remained gentle. Caleb's chest tightened. He didn't like how much those details affected him. Vulnerability wasn't something he wanted to see, especially in someone he planned to use. Ella returned to refill his coffee, unaware of what he'd heard. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. Caleb studied her, really studied her for the first time. Not her smile, not her simplicity, but her strength. "Everything's fine," he said, voice lower, almost honest. She nodded, offering a kindness she didn't know he didn't deserve. Caleb should have left then. Should have protected himself before the plan became something more complicated. But he didn't. He stayed. listening to her talk to other customers, hearing her laugh, watching her clean tables with humble grace. Something inside him tugged, a pull he didn't want, didn't expect, and definitely didn't plan for. As he got up to leave, Ella approached with the check. "It was nice seeing you again," she said genuinely. The words warmed him in a way he didn't expect. Not flirtation, not interest, just truth. And truth was something he rarely encountered. Caleb hesitated before responding. "I might come back tomorrow." Ella smiled, unaware of the storm forming inside him. "You're always welcome here." Her kindness was simple, but it landed like grace. Undeserved, uncalculated, freely given. Caleb stepped outside feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter from her presence. Heavier from the lie he was living. As he walked to his SUV, Caleb felt a strange tightening in his chest. He told himself this was all still part of the plan, a test of influence, nothing more. But something deep, something spiritual, whispered a truth he wasn't ready to face. He wasn't drawing Ella into his world. God was drawing him into hers. And pride had no defense against a woman with a humble heart. Caleb didn't plan to return to the diner the next day, yet he found himself driving there before his mind could argue with his heart. Each mile felt like crossing a line he shouldn't cross. His pride insisted this was strategy, a demonstration, a game he controlled. But something deeper whispered otherwise. Something he refused to acknowledge as conviction. Ella was wiping down a table when she saw him walk in. Her eyes widened just slightly, a hint of surprise mixed with a gentle welcome. "Back already?" she asked, smiling softly. Caleb's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. "Guess your coffee is better than I expected," he said, attempting a casual smirk. Ella laughed lightly, not overthinking his presence. He sat in the same booth as before, and Ella instinctively brought him coffee without asking. "Thought you might want it," she said. Caleb watched her hands briefly, noticing the faint calluses from years of hard work. She lived a life he didn't understand. One without shortcuts, without privilege, without ego. And that unnerved him. As she walked away, two young men at the counter exchanged glances. "Looks like Ella's got herself a city man," one whispered. The other chuckled. "Hope he's good enough for her." Caleb's jaw tensed. He wasn't used to being evaluated, especially not by strangers who didn't know his status, his money, his power. That unfamiliar discomfort exposed a raw nerve he didn't know existed. Ella returned to take his order, sensing his tension. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. Caleb hesitated, torn between honesty and pride. "People here talk a lot," he muttered. Ella shrugged gently. "It's a small town, but most of the time it comes from care, not malice." His world was the opposite. Gossip meant power, manipulation, leverage. Her perspective felt unbearably pure. When she left to put in the order, Caleb glanced around the diner. Families laughing, old friends catching up, people greeting each other by name. It was messy, imperfect, loud, and strangely comforting. Something in him ached, a feeling he quickly buried. Vulnerability had no place in the games he played. Halfway through his breakfast, Ella returned with fresh coffee, not noticing the storm brewing behind his eyes. "I like this table for you," she said lightly. "You can see the whole diner from here." Caleb raised a brow. "You think I like watching people?" Ella nodded. "I think you like understanding them. You watch differently, like you're searching for something." The comment struck deeper than she knew. Caleb felt exposed, seen in a way he didn't permit. "I'm not searching for anything," he snapped, sharper than intended. Ella stepped back slightly, surprised but not offended. "All right," she said gently. "Just an observation." Her calm response made him feel even worse. She didn't fight pride with pride. She simply absorbed it with grace. Guilt pricked him unexpectedly. He didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want her to see the parts of him he worked so hard to hide. Yet she seemed to see through the surface, not with judgment, but with curiosity, and that terrified him more than confrontation ever could. As he finished eating, the diner door opened, and a group of local teenagers stepped in, laughing loudly. One of them accidentally bumped into Ella, making her spill a bit of water on her apron. "Watch it," Caleb barked, his tone cold and authoritative. The boys froze, startled. Ella turned to him immediately. "Caleb, it's fine," she insisted. "Really?" But Caleb wasn't used to letting things be fine. In his world, mistakes were unacceptable, and respect was demanded. His reaction revealed more about his upbringing than he intended. Ella touched his arm lightly. "They're kids. No harm done." Her kindness disarmed him again. She led with compassion, not control. The boys apologized, and Ella smiled warmly at them before returning to the counter. Caleb watched the interaction, realizing something painfully true. She handled people the way he wished he could. With patience, with humility, with balance. A quiet frustration rose in him, not toward her, but toward himself. When she came back to check on him, Caleb tried to soften his tone. "Sorry about earlier," he said, almost grumbling the apology out. Ella tilted her head slightly, a gentle smile forming. "It happens. We all have moments." Her acceptance made him feel something strange, or like forgiveness wrapped in simplicity. But the moment couldn't stay peaceful. Across the room, Caleb overheard two women gossiping about Ella. "She's too trusting," one said. "One day someone's going to take advantage of that heart." Caleb felt a sudden, protective heat rising in his chest. He didn't know why it bothered him, or why he wanted to defend her. Ella, unaware, continued working with genuine joy. Caleb found himself watching her for reasons he didn't want to admit. This wasn't strategy anymore. This wasn't part of the plan. Something about her heart had begun to reach places in him he thought were long dead, and that realization frightened him. He stood to leave but paused at the counter where Ella was refilling sugar jars. "Thank you for today," he said carefully. Ella looked up, surprised by the softness in his tone. "You're welcome, Caleb." Her voice held warmth, not expectation. She didn't push for more, she simply let him be. Stepping outside, Caleb inhaled deeply. The cool air hit his lungs like truth. He came to prove something, to play a game of pride and control. But instead, he felt the weight of honesty pressing on him. A weight he hadn't felt in years. Ella wasn't falling into his plan, she was changing it. As he walked away, a single thought formed quietly, like a whisper he wanted to ignore. What if she isn't the one being tested? What if I am? Pride resisted the idea, but Caleb couldn't deny it anymore. Ella's heart was starting to reveal his own. And truth, when it starts to hurt, is always the beginning of transformation. Caleb drove to the diner the next day expecting everything to feel the same. Ella's smile, the quiet tables, the soft warmth that had started to pull him in despite his intentions. But the moment he walked through the door, he sensed a shift. Whispering, eyes lingering, a tension he couldn't explain. Even Ella seemed more reserved, her smile smaller, guarded. She greeted him politely, but not warmly. Something in her tone had changed. For the first time since he met her, she didn't move with her usual ease. Her kindness was still there, but quieter, almost hidden behind caution. Caleb felt the air tighten around him. Pride tried to brush it off, but the pit in his stomach grew. He sat down, trying to read her expression. She avoided eye contact, focusing on the coffee pot in her hands. When she finally approached his table, she set the cup down too carefully, as if keeping distance. "Coffee," she said simply. No soft welcome, no gentle small talk. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years, fear wrapped in confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked. Ella hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing. But her voice betrayed her. She glanced toward the counter where two older women whispered behind menus, their expressions sharp. Caleb's jaw tightened as he pieced it together. Someone had said something, and he had a sinking feeling about what. As Caleb listened more carefully, he caught fragments of their gossip. Just like her father, too trusting. Men like him don't change. She doesn't see what he's doing. A cold rush ran through him. They were talking about him, and about Ella. Someone had told them his intentions, or worse, exaggerated the truth in ways he couldn't defend. Ella returned to his table with a clipped politeness he had never seen from her. "Will that be all?" she asked, not staying long enough for him to answer. He felt something heavy settle in his chest. This wasn't just tension. This was disappointment. And somehow it mattered. Too much. Unable to let it go, he stood and followed her to the counter. "Ella, did someone tell you something about me?" She froze, shoulders tightening. She didn't turn around. When she finally faced him, her eyes held a sadness that pierced deeper than anger ever could. "I don't want to talk about it here." Those words struck him like a blow. Not because she rejected the conversation, but because she had something to say. Ella took a breath, then stepped outside to the small area behind the diner where deliveries were made. Caleb followed, heart pounding, sensing that his entire game was dissolving. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with a hurt she tried to mask. "I heard you were using me, that this was a joke, a bet, or some kind of pride thing." Caleb felt the ground tilt beneath him. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth anymore either. And the worst part was knowing she'd heard before he could change. He swallowed hard. "Ella, listen." But she lifted a hand, stopping him. "I have been embarrassed before. Misled before. I don't need it again." Her eyes glistened. Not with tears, but with strength and resolve. She wasn't weak. She wasn't naive. She was a woman who had learned to guard her heart with grace. His chest constricted. For the first time, Caleb felt ashamed. Not manipulated, not cornered, but genuinely ashamed. A version of himself he didn't want her to see was now standing between them like a shadow he couldn't hide. Pride had always saved him, but here, it was destroying something he couldn't name. "Ella, yes, I had a wrong intention when I first came here," he admitted, voice low. "But it wasn't what you think. And it's not what's happening now." She winced at his honesty, as if truth hurt more than a lie would have. "You should have never played with something you didn't understand," she whispered. Caleb took a step closer. "I didn't know it would matter. I didn't know you would matter." Ella shook her head, looking away. "People like me don't get to take risks with people like you. We're the ones who pay the price." Her words hit him like a revelation. Humility spoken by someone who had lived more pain than he imagined. "Ella, please, let me fix this." His voice broke slightly, surprising even himself. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping. "You can't fix a heart by explaining why you broke it." Caleb felt something inside him splinter. Pride cracked open, and what spilled out was fear. Fear of losing something good before it even began. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, quieter now. Ella met his eyes, and for the first time he saw disappointment instead of warmth. "Then why did you start this with lies?" He had no answer. Not one that would honor her. Not one that would sound like truth to her wounded heart. She stepped back, creating a physical and emotional distance that felt like a door closing. "Caleb, I need space. Please don't come back for a while." His throat tightened. He wanted to protest, to argue, to insist he had changed. But all those impulses came from pride, and pride was what got him here in the first place. So he forced himself to nod. "Okay," he whispered, even though it felt like surrender. Ella turned away, wiping her hands on her apron before walking back inside the diner. The door closed softly behind her, but the sound echoed in Caleb's chest like a verdict he couldn't escape. He stood alone in the cool morning air, watching his breath rise like smoke. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He didn't feel in control. He felt broken. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet whisper stirred, the kind he hadn't heard in a long time. This is where change begins, not in pride, in truth. And God was just getting started. Caleb drove away from the diner with a heaviness he couldn't shake. The road blurred through the haze of regret clouding his eyes. For the first time in years, silence felt loud, like every mile echoed with the mistakes he had tried to ignore. He turned off the radio, unable to drown out the truth rising inside him like a tide he couldn't resist. When he arrived at his penthouse overlooking the small town, the view felt emptier than it had ever been. Wealth, success, the polished furniture, nothing brought comfort. He walked through the rooms restlessly, pacing as if trying to outrun the weight in his chest. But guilt followed him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. He finally stopped in front of the massive window, staring at the night sky stretching over the quiet town. Somewhere down there, Ella was probably closing the diner, sweeping floors, locking doors, and avoiding him. The thought hit him harder than expected. He had disappointed her. Worse, he had confirmed every fear she had learned to carry. "Why did I do that?" he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. He had played games his entire adult life, manipulating situations to maintain control. But this time the game felt hollow. Ugly. Wrong. The reflection in the glass stared back at him. A man who had everything but peace. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, head bowed. A pressure weighed on him. Unfamiliar, almost spiritual. It felt like someone was peeling back layers he had spent years constructing. Pride, ego, self-protection, all cracking under the realization that he had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Someone who had shown him grace when he didn't even see it. He took a deep breath, but it shook on the way out. His chest tightened. His throat burned. He didn't cry. Not yet. But the ache felt dangerously close. What bothered him most wasn't the misunderstanding. It was the truth. Ella had been right about him. And that truth broke something in him he couldn't put back together. He stood abruptly, pacing again, almost angry at himself. Why does she matter? He snapped into the empty room. But the question wasn't anger. It was confession. Ella mattered because she was everything he wasn't. Honest, steady, pure-hearted. And her disappointment held more weight than any boardroom loss he'd ever faced. Hours passed. The night grew deeper. And Caleb found himself sitting on the edge of his bed, hands clasped together without realizing it. A position he hadn't taken since childhood. A position he had abandoned after losing faith years ago. Yet tonight, something tugged him into silence. A silence that felt like an invitation. He swallowed hard, staring at the floor. No words came. He didn't know how to pray anymore. Didn't know what to say to a God he had ignored for so long. His chest tightened again and he lowered his head, breath trembling. The weight became unbearable, so heavy he couldn't hold it on his own. The first tear fell before he even felt it forming. It landed on his hands, shocking him into stillness. He blinked quickly, but more followed. Slow, uncontrolled, honest. Tears he hadn't shed in years. Tears of regret, of truth, of pride crumbling one piece at a time. He finally whispered, barely audible, "God, I messed this up." The words broke something open inside him. He inhaled sharply as if releasing years of buried emotion. "I hurt her," he whispered, voice cracking. "I hurt someone who did nothing but show me kindness." He squeezed his eyes shut, ashamed. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to fix me." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It felt like someone was listening. Someone who had been waiting. Caleb felt the weight shift, not disappear, but move from his shoulders to his knees. And without planning it, without thinking it through, he slid from the bed to the floor, landing on both knees. His hands dropped to the carpet and he bowed his head, breaths coming uneven. He didn't know how long he stayed there. He just knew this was the lowest he had ever been. And yet it was the first time he felt close to something real. "God, please," he whispered. "Help me. Change me. Don't let me stay this man." Memories flashed through his mind. Childhood prayers whispered in dark rooms, promises he made to himself after disappointments, walls he built around his heart. Tonight, those walls began to crumble, and with every crumble, another tear fell. "I don't want to break people to prove I'm strong," he confessed. "I don't want pride to ruin me." He stayed there, hands trembling, breath unsteady, not begging for Ella back, not yet, but begging for something deeper. Redemption, a chance to become someone worthy of the second chance he desperately hoped God might give him, someone who could look Ella in the eyes without shame. As he lifted his head slowly, the room looked the same, but he didn't feel the same. Something inside him had shifted. A crack in the armor, a softening in the heart. a quiet sense that this breaking wasn't punishment, it was mercy. The beginning of a transformation his pride had spent years resisting. He wiped his face, breathing deeply, exhaustion settling into his bones. The night felt quieter now, not empty, but sacred. He stayed seated on the floor for a long time, letting the silence shape him. For the first time in his life, Caleb felt smaller, but in a way that brought a strange, unexpected peace. As he finally stood, he whispered one last prayer into the soft darkness. God, don't let this be the end of my story. And without knowing it, heaven was already moving. Because a man who falls to his knees is a man God can lift again. And Caleb's breaking was only the beginning of his rebuilding. The next morning, sunlight filtered through Caleb's windows. But for the first time, it didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like exposure. His eyes were tired, his heart heavy. Yet something inside him felt strangely new, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. He rubbed his face, remembering every word he whispered on the floor last night. He wasn't the same man who walked into the diner days ago. He tried to go on with his morning routine, but nothing felt right. Coffee tasted bitter. Emails felt pointless. Meetings felt hollow. His world, polished, efficient, controlled, suddenly seemed small. Ella's quiet strength had shown him a different way to live, and now the contrast felt unbearable. He couldn't run from that truth anymore. By late morning, he found himself driving again, this time not toward the diner but toward the quiet outskirts of town. He needed space. He needed honesty. He needed clarity he couldn't find in boardrooms or penthouses. He pulled into an empty overlook where the town stretched below him, peaceful and unaware of the battle happening inside him. He sat on the hood of his SUV, staring at the streets where Ella walked every day. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself, not in frustration but in reflection. He wasn't chasing control anymore. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to understand. And understanding required humility, a language he was only just beginning to learn. After a long silence, he did something unexpected. He drove to the church near the center of town. The small white building with its wooden steeple and creaking steps felt foreign, yet strangely familiar. He hesitated at the door, hand hovering over the handle. He wasn't sure he belonged there, but something deeper pulled him in. Inside, the sanctuary was empty, filled with soft light from stained glass windows. He walked down the aisle slowly, each step echoing with memories he didn't want to face. The pastor wasn't there. No choir, no service, just stillness. Caleb sat in the last row, elbows on his knees, letting the silence confront him again. He didn't pray right away. He didn't know how, but he closed his eyes and breathed deeply, remembering Ella's words. God cares about people. And you're one. Something inside him cracked softly. Maybe God had been waiting for him long before all this. Before pride made him blind. Before ambition hardened him. Before grief had closed his heart. When he finally whispered, "I need help," it wasn't dramatic. It was honest. And honesty loosened the tightness in his chest. He stayed there for a long time, letting his thoughts unravel. There was no miracle moment. No thunder, no shining light. Just peace. The kind that settles slowly, like dawn breaking through the night. When Caleb left the church, he didn't feel fixed, but he felt seen. And that small shift was enough to move him toward what came next, facing Ella again. Not to convince her, not to defend himself, but to honor her, and to take responsibility for the pain he caused, even if she never gave him a second chance. He drove back to the diner around mid-afternoon, intentionally avoiding the busy hours. The bell above the door chimed softly as he walked in. Ella was wiping a table near the back. She froze when she looked up, surprise flickering across her face, followed by hesitation. Caleb's heart tightened, but he didn't step closer. "Ella," he said gently. His voice held none of the confidence she once associated with him. It was quiet, vulnerable, real. She took a breath, setting the cloth down. "Caleb, I thought I asked you for space." He nodded. "I know, and I'm not here to push anything. I'm here to apologize. Truly." Ella crossed her arms, Not in anger, but in self-protection. You already explained. I heard you. Caleb shook his head. I didn't explain. I confessed. That distinction made her blink. He continued, voice steady. You deserve truth, not excuses. You deserve someone who values you, not someone who treats you like a test. Ella's expression softened just a little, though her guard remained. Why are you telling me this now? He exhaled. Because last night I realized something. I don't want to be the man who hurt you, and I don't want to live another day with pride guiding my decisions. She looked down, her fingers tightening on the cloth in her hands. He didn't move closer. He didn't try to touch her. He simply stood still, giving her the space she had asked for. Ella, you opened my eyes without meaning to. You showed me what real kindness looks like, what real strength looks like. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted you to know how much you impacted me. Ella swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. She didn't expect him to sound like that. She didn't expect humility from the man who had walked into the diner with such arrogance. People don't change overnight, Caleb, she said softly. He nodded. I know. But I started changing last night, and I'm willing to keep going, even if you never see it. Something inside her loosened. Not forgiveness yet, but possibility. She studied him carefully, as if searching for cracks in his intentions. All she saw was sincerity, unexpected and disarming. Thank you, she whispered, unsure of what else to say. It wasn't closure. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was truth, meeting truth. Caleb stepped back, ready to leave. I won't come unless you want me to, he said quietly. Your comfort matters more than my pride now. That sentence struck her deeply. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not with honesty, not with respect. She watched him turn toward the door, hesitation flickering in her chest. Just as he reached the exit, Ella spoke softly. Caleb, I need time, but I don't want this to end with anger. He turned slightly, hope flickering in his eyes. She wasn't offering reconciliation yet, but she wasn't closing the door either. And that small grace felt like the beginning of something real, something God was shaping in both of them. Ella spent the next few days keeping her distance, but her thoughts betrayed her. Every quiet moment, every slow morning, every pause between customers seemed to bring Caleb back to her mind. Not the Caleb who walked into the diner with arrogance, but the Caleb who stood before her, humbled, sincere, and broken enough to change. She didn't know what to do with that complexity. Meanwhile, Caleb kept his promise. He didn't return to the diner, didn't send messages, didn't try to manipulate the situation. He carried his new restraint like a discipline, reminding himself that respecting her space was part of the transformation he prayed for. Still, he couldn't deny the ache he felt each morning when he didn't go where his heart wanted. On the fourth day, the whole town prepared for the annual fall festival, a beloved tradition filled with pumpkins, lights, food stalls, and music. Ella helped decorate the diner's booth, tying ribbons and arranging pies. She tried to focus on the joy around her, but a quiet expectation tugged at her heart. She wondered if Caleb would come. He wasn't planning to. But as the afternoon sun dipped low and golden light washed over the town square, something inside him whispered, "Go." Not to chase her, not to fix anything, but to show up in humility, not pride. So he parked far from the crowd, walking slowly, unsure if he belonged among these warm, familiar faces. People noticed him, the expensive coat, the polished demeanor, but their reactions varied. Some whispered, some stared, but Caleb kept walking, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. Vulnerability looked strange on him, yet it fit the moment perfectly. He wasn't here to be admired. He was here to honor a truth bigger than his ego. Ella saw him from across the square and her breath caught. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Not because he stood out, though he did. But because he looked different, softer, smaller, human, the kind of man who wasn't hiding behind pride anymore. Her heart beat faster, confusion and curiosity intertwining. When their eyes met, Caleb didn't move toward her. He simply offered a small, respectful nod, a gesture that said, I see you. I honor your space. Ella felt something warm bloom in her chest at that humility. She excused herself from the booth, asking a co-worker to take over, and walked toward the quieter side of the square. Caleb followed only when she had created enough distance from the crowd. They ended up near an old oak tree where fairy lights draped over the branches. The air carried the scent of caramel apples and the distant sound of laughter. It was peaceful enough for truth. Ella took a slow breath. You came. Caleb nodded. I didn't want to, but something told me I needed to. Ella crossed her arms, not defensively this time, just steadying herself. And what are you hoping to find here? He hesitated, choosing his words with care. Not forgiveness, not comfort, just honesty. Between us. They stood in silence for a moment, the festival noise fading behind them. Ella looked down at her hands. I've been thinking, she whispered, not about what you did, but about who you've been trying to become. Caleb's heart tightened. I'm still trying. I'll keep trying. With or without a place in your life. Ella lifted her gaze, tears glistening but not falling. Do you understand how hard it is for me to trust again? Caleb nodded immediately. Yes, and that's why I won't rush you. You deserve patience. You deserve respect. And I owe you both. That sentence broke her hesitation, not completely, but enough to let hope slip in. You hurt me, she said softly. You hurt my pride and my heart, but you also showed me something I didn't expect. Caleb braced himself. What's that? Ella exhaled shakily. That people can change when they actually want to, not for appearances, not for control, but because God touches something inside them. Caleb swallowed the emotion climbing in his throat. Ella, you were that touch. God used you to open my eyes. I'll never pretend otherwise. She closed her eyes for a second as if absorbing the truth she had waited to hear. When she opened them again, something in her expression had softened, a little faith returning. Still, she wasn't ready to collapse into forgiveness. She stepped a little closer but kept a respectful distance. I don't know where this goes, she admitted. I don't know if I can trust everything right away. Caleb nodded gently. You don't have to. Let the truth take its time. Let us take our time. A breeze rustled the leaves above them, scattering tiny reflections of light on the ground. Ella watched the patterns dance at their feet. Caleb, she whispered, almost to herself. You stood up for me. You apologized without excuses. You honored what I asked. Those things matter. He felt something warm spread through his chest. Gratitude. She took a small breath, steadying her voice. I'm willing to try again. Not to start where we left off, but to start where we should have begun. Caleb felt his knees weaken slightly, not from pride but from relief. Ella, I won't waste this chance, I promise. And for the first time, she believed him. They didn't touch, didn't rush into closeness. They simply stood under the oak tree as the festival lights flickered softly around them. Two people marked by past wounds meeting in a moment shaped by truth, humility, and grace. Ella offered a small smile, hesitant, hopeful, real. Caleb returned it with a tenderness he never showed anyone. As they walked back toward the festival, not side by side but close enough for possibility to breathe between them, Ella whispered a quiet thought that only heaven heard. If this is the beginning of something new, let it be written by you. And for the first time, Caleb felt that same prayer echo in his own heart. The days after the festival felt different for both of them. Not rushed, not heavy, just steady. Ella found herself looking forward to Caleb's presence, though she still moved cautiously, protecting the lessons life had taught her. Caleb, on the other hand, carried himself with quiet humility, choosing every step with intention and prayer. It wasn't romance yet, it was rebuilding. Caleb made a point of showing up not with grand gestures but with consistency. He helped carry boxes for the diner's morning deliveries. He held the door open for customers without expecting Ella to notice. He learned the names of the elderly regulars and treated them with kindness. Slowly, the town began to soften toward him too. Ella watched him from a distance at first. She saw the sincerity in his new behavior. No manipulation, no charm designed to impress. Just a man learning how to be better. A man letting God shape him. Every time she saw him offer grace instead of pride, something inside her healed a little more. One afternoon she found him sitting alone on a bench near the river that ran behind the town square. He seemed lost in thought, the breeze stirring his hair, sunlight reflecting in soft patterns on the water. She hesitated, then walked over, sitting beside him without a word. Caleb smiled gently, grateful for her presence. "I've been thinking a lot," Ella said quietly. Caleb glanced at her, attentive. "About us. About everything that happened." He nodded. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. Not trust, not affection, not a second chance." She shook her head softly. "Second chances aren't deserved. They're granted. And only when God leads." Her words humbled him all over again. He lowered his gaze. "Ella, I can't promise perfection, but I can promise honesty and effort." She studied him with steady eyes. "I don't need perfection. I just need truth. And a heart that chooses what's right even when no one is watching." Caleb felt emotion rise in his chest, a quiet gratitude steeped in awe. In the following weeks, their connection deepened, not through big declarations, but through small, tender moments. Sharing coffee in the early mornings before the diner opened, walking home after her shifts, talking about faith, fears, and dreams, learning each other's rhythms, understanding each other's wounds. Caleb also sought advice from the town's pastor, visiting him quietly in the evenings. He didn't want praise, he wanted growth. He wanted God to continue chiseling away the pieces of pride he once wore like armor. He wanted to learn how to love without selfishness, something no one had ever taught him before. One particular night, Ella returned home exhausted after a long shift. To her surprise, Caleb was sitting on her porch steps, not waiting to talk, but waiting to help. He stood immediately. "I noticed your light by the back door was flickering. I brought tools to fix it. You shouldn't have to come home in the dark." Ella felt a warmth flood her chest. Acts like that weren't romantic to her. They were revealing. They showed her the truth of a changed heart more than any words could. She leaned on the porch railing, watching him work quietly under the soft glow of the street lamp. She saw the sincerity in his effort, the patience in his movements, the humility in every gesture. When he finished, Caleb stepped back, wiping his hands. "I don't want you afraid," he said simply. Ella looked at the newly fixed light. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Not anymore." The words hung softly in the air, and Caleb felt them land in a place he wasn't expecting, a place that longed for belonging. Over the next few days, Ella prayed frequently, seeking clarity. "God, if this is real, show me." And little by little, she felt peace grow where doubt once lived. Caleb wasn't the same man who walked into the diner with arrogance. Pride had broken, truth had rebuilt, and love was beginning to breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped into shades of amber and rose, Caleb met Ella again under the oak tree from the fall festival, the place where truth first softened their hearts. "Why here?" she asked, smiling softly. Caleb's voice was quiet, "Because this was the first place I felt hope. Real hope." He took a breath, gathering courage. "Ella, you don't owe me anything. Not your trust, not your forgiveness, not your affection. But I want to honor whatever place you let me have in your life. I want to walk in truth, in humility, in love, the kind that protects instead of hurts." Ella's heart stirred with a tenderness she couldn't hide anymore. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of his honesty. "Caleb, I'm not afraid of being hurt," she said softly. "I'm afraid of believing in someone who won't choose me when things get hard." Caleb's eyes softened with understanding. "I will choose you," he whispered. "Not because I'm trying to win, but because choosing you is choosing the man God is teaching me to be." Tears welled in Ella's eyes, not of pain this time, but of relief, of healing, of hope returning in slow, steady waves. She reached for his hand, not with uncertainty, but with intention. Their fingers intertwined gently, naturally. like two stories finally aligning. Caleb felt his heart steady, his past loosen, his future open. Standing under the oak tree with faith surrounding them like soft light, they both understood. This was no longer a story shaped by pride. It was a story shaped by God, by truth, by humble love. As they walked back toward town hand in hand, Ella whispered, "Let's build this day by day." Caleb smiled, gratitude filling his soul. "With God leading," he replied, and for the first time in his life, he truly meant it. In a small American town, far from the noise of the world and the pride that once defined his heart, Caleb discovered something he never expected, that God rebuilds what arrogance destroys, that grace speaks louder than ego, that love grows best in hearts willing to kneel before heaven first. Ella did not save him, but God used her. Her gentleness confronted his pride. Her honesty exposed his truth. Her forgiveness opened a door he thought was forever closed. And in that sacred space between hurt and healing, Caleb became a different man. Not because he tried to impress her, but because he finally allowed God to reshape the parts of him he once protected with walls. Their story wasn't born from perfection. It was born from brokenness submitted to grace, from mistakes transformed into growth, from humility that finally learned how to love. And as Caleb and Ella walked forward, step by step, day by day, their lives reminded everyone around them that God can redeem any story, no matter how prideful its beginning. Because when pride makes a man fall, God is always ready to lift him into a future he never imagined. If this story touched you, don't leave just yet. Hit like, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your story matters, and God is not done writing it.